this is the only time I've used the app whilst talking about that. So very interesting.
Funny.
Hello, beautiful souls. I hope you guys are doing super well today. So this is part 2 of that footage that I recorded 18 months ago where I was telling spooky stories, and I struggled to edit it at the time because the house that I was living in was super haunted. It was strange for me to edit, even though I'm here in this new space, I'm here in my new office. Editing that footage was really strange because I was sitting in my haunted house, talking about my haunted house, and I am so happy to be out of that house. It was really difficult living in that space. So editing the footage for this video was really weird because I found myself reminiscing about all of the other small nuances that used to happen in that house on the daily. The nightmares that I used to have. I used to have night terrors probably 3 or 4 times a week where I would just wake up screaming. I'd get up in the middle of the night needing the bathroom and I would be too scared to leave my room, even though the room I was in was also haunted. I was just scared all the time in that house. And, you know, I don't mind admitting that to you now that I'm not there anymore, but that place was very scary because the energy in that place was so heavy. I think just because it had been there for so long, the building was so old, the energy was just kind of stacked on top of itself. It attracted a lot of not nice things. So editing this footage was quite difficult because I was remembering all of this stuff that I've now escaped. Maybe one day I'll talk about that other stuff, but honestly I don't feel ready to do that just yet. So buckle up for this one because there's some pretty creepy stuff that was going on whilst I was recording this that I didn't discover until I edited the footage. This was the first time I'd ever reviewed the footage. So for about 18 months it's been sitting on my computer unwatched. Prepare yourself, this one's pretty creepy. The second paranormal experience that I have to share with you guys is about my house, where I live. The village that I live in was recorded in the Domesday Book. The village church was built in the year 1200. It's crazy old. This whole village is crazy old. It's full of listed buildings, both grade 1 and grade 2. The building that I live in isn't actually a listed building, but it is hella old. It's what you would expect like a ye olde English building to look like, especially on the inside. Low ceilings, beams, like exposed beams, weird shaped doorways. Everything's really creaky. The walls are full of horsehair and straw. Built in the 1600s, hella old. And as you can imagine, it's pretty active. I've lived here now for getting on for 3 years now, and I've experienced all kinds of stuff in this place. I cleanse it regularly because it's just teeming with residual energy. The building is huge and it's split into 4 separate apartments. So I live in one of the upstairs apartments. There's a shared stairwell and front door, a bit like an apartment block, you know, where you have a shared front door and then shared stairs, and then you have your own individual front doors. It's exactly like that. A few months ago, my neighbour, who lives just across the way from me, he moved out. Contractors came in and started to redecorate the apartment, ready to be rented out to another tenant. During this time, there was lots of weird stuff going on. Like, I would hear disembodied voices, I would hear doors opening and closing, I would hear knocks and scuffles and things coming from the apartment next door at night when there's no one in there. Some days the place was empty and there was no work getting done, and I would hear a radio playing and there'd be no one in there. Multiple times I'd come out of my front door, I'd noticed that all of the lights were on in the apartment, but there's not
there's no one in there and no one's been in there. The front door to that apartment would just be wide open sometimes, no one in there. A lot of the time during the day, because I work from home, I'm the only person in the whole building. You know, I live in a small village, I know all of my neighbours. I know that I'm the only person here most days. If any of my neighbours are in, I know what their schedules are, I know when they're at home and when they're not. It's just like that when you're a tight-knit community, you just know what each other's doing. I know categorically that the times that I've experienced weird happening in that apartment, I've been in the building all by myself. One particular encounter or experience that I remember was my housemate had just come home from work. I took Lottie outside to do the biz, and I went downstairs. So we came out of our front door, and our front doors are opposite each other. Then I go down a flight of stairs out the front door. And so I came out of my front door, and the empty apartment door was just slightly ajar. And I thought, oh, maybe painters and decorators have been in there today. Maybe, probably not. I don't think that they have been, but I'm just going to tell myself that they were, because otherwise that's really creepy. And I observed that there were no lights on or anything in there, because I would have seen the light come through the gap in the door. And it was just starting to get dark. It's kind of like it is now. It's like just starting to get dark, like just creeping into dusk. So I go outside with Lottie. I was out there for about 5-10 minutes or so. And then as I come back in, I noticed that the lights were on. In the kitchen window looks over the front door for that empty apartment, so I noticed the lights were on, and they weren't on when I left, and now they're on. So I come in with Lottie. We come up the stairs. The front door is wide open, and all the lights in the apartment were on. And I thought, I'm going to investigate this, right? You know, I know the landlord. I knew he wouldn't mind me sort of snooping around in there. So I popped Lottie back into the house, and then I came out and I went into the apartment. I sort of edged my way into the empty apartment, and I'm calling out like, hello, is there anyone in there? It's only me, it's only Alice, like, just wondered if there's anyone in here. I walked through the entire apartment. There was no one in there at all. No one in there. Completely empty. So as I'm walking back through the rooms to come out, I'm turning all the lights off. And I closed the front door behind me. I pulled it up behind me, and then I went back into my apartment. My housemate was like right there when I came in, and I was like, something just really bizarre just happened. And I relayed what had just happened, and I was like, look. And I opened the front door to show him that I'd closed that door. The door is wide open, and all the lights are on again. When I had just left, turned all the lights off and shut the door, and the door is open and the lights are on. And he's like looking at me like, so you didn't shut them on? I did. I turned the lights off and I closed the door, and now it's open again. So we both went in there, turned all the lights off and closed the door, went back into our apartment about an hour later. So now it's nighttime, right? And it's dark, and there's definitely no one in there because it's nighttime. About an hour or so later, I took Lottie outside again to do the biz, as you do. And when I come out, front door wide open, lights are still off, but the front door wide open. I'm like, what? That was, I think, the first time that it happened, but it continued for a couple of weeks. I got to know one of the painters that had been painting the walls and moving some things around in there. And I was like, have you noticed anything sort of weird happening in that apartment? He was like, you know what? I have. And he said, do you think it's haunted? And I said, yep, I think it's haunted. And he was like, well, that confirms it. And even us just having that conversation, I think we confirmed for each other that the place was haunted. And he said, the other day I left he had like a little radio with an aerial that came out the top, and he had that sat on the windowsill whilst he was painting. And I was like, that's the radio that I hear sometimes. And then I said to him, you had that radio with you, I guess, like yesterday or whenever. And he said, no, I wasn't here that day. I'm like, but I heard the radio. And he said, oh no, I take it home with me every time I go home. Like, I take it home with me, I never leave it here. And I'm like, I heard music playing from, oh, it's making my eyes water. I'm getting goosebumps. I heard the radio playing in here and I just assumed that you were in here painting. And he's like, no, I never leave the radio here. And he said the other day he left the radio on whilst he nipped out. There's like a little village shop just down the road. He broke for lunch and he left the radio playing music, and he said, this radio is mint. It works perfectly every time. It never like turns itself off or switches station by itself, or like, it's just, he sets it to music and it plays music and that's it. It works perfectly. And he said that he left it there playing music and he went off to go and get a sandwich. And he was only gone for about 10 minutes. And when he came back, the thing was just playing solid white noise. And he was like, he couldn't work out why it was doing it. And the station hadn't changed. It was playing music and now it wasn't. And he turned it off and he turned it on again. And then it was playing music like it should. And he said that he'd also experienced turning lights either on or off in a room. And then he'd go off into another room and then he'd come back. And if he left the light on, it would be off. Or if he turned the light off, it would now be on. He said he'd put his tools down, he'd go off maybe to the bathroom, and then he'd come back and his tools would be missing, and then they'd turn up in a room that he definitely didn't leave them in. All sorts of just crazy shenanigans going on in this apartment. And between us, we came to the conclusion that, of course, the place is being redecorated, stuff's being moved, things are being changed, it's kicking up all of the energy. So about a week after this, all of this stuff that was happening, I just started to get used to, the walls are very thin, and I just started to get used to hearing stuff from the apartment next door and knowing that there's no one in there, and it's a spirit knocking about in there. It's banging. I'd hear chairs scraping across the floor. I'd hear voices, two or three people talking to each other. There's no one in there. And I just got used to that. I got used to going outside and looking back up at the house and seeing that the kitchen light was on, even though there's no one in there. And the light was off when I left the house, and when I come back, the light's on. I'm like, well, it's the ghost, you know. About a week later, they started doing work downstairs in the shared stairwell. They were chipping the plaster off of the wall and they were stripping it down to the bare brick. And it wasn't until they started doing that I started to experience all this kind of weird paranormal stuff in my apartment. It got so bad that I actually spoke to my landlord and I asked him to hurry the up and finish the work. Unfortunately, my landlord has a habit of dragging work out for months on end, and this had been going on, I think, for a good couple of weeks to a month. So the stuff I was experiencing was lights flickering, putting stuff down and then coming back for it and it's not there, and then it will turn up in a weird spot. I was experiencing really intense nightmares. I think maybe Lottie just sneezed, because she is over there. Let's put it down to that. I was like crazy losing sleep. My kitchen is like the front door is in the kitchen. So the kitchen is the room that is the closest to the stairwell. Every time I went in the kitchen, I'd feel sick. I'd feel like my throat was closing up. My chest would feel heavy, like I couldn't breathe. It just felt super creepy in there. The energy was just so not right in there. And it never felt like that before. Never at all. So I was saying to my landlord, can you just get on with it? Because there's some weird things happening in the house. And he's like, oh, like ghosts. I'm like, no, really? And he's like, oh, because he obviously thinks it's all
Flames.
It just said flames. He obviously thinks it's all bullshit. So he was just like, oh, haha. I'm like, no, haha. Like, no, I can't sleep. and I don't feel nice being in my house, so can you just get on with it? So it still went on, I think, for another week or two. In that time, I was using this app that I'm using now, right? So it goes through, it has a dictionary of about 3,500 words, and spirits can manipulate the energy around it, I guess, to pull out certain words. So just a little bit of background. When I first moved in, immediately I became aware of two spirits. One of them was not particularly active, but certainly intelligent. He said, how? Anyway. So this guy, his name is George. He's a very nice man. He's very professional. He used to work here when this building was used as a post office. It was not recently. It was certainly...
How?
How? You said how again. What do you mean? What do you mean how? How what? Just whilst I'm talking about George. George, are you here? No, you and I haven't spoken for a long while. But yeah, so he used to run the place when this building was a post office. And he showed up on my first night here. He was standing in this doorway right here. He was wearing like a navy blue suit with a waistcoat and like a pillbox type hat with a little peak on it. And he had a watch chain, a pocket watch. He was inquiring as to why I was here, because I'm female. So he was alive during a time where women weren't allowed in certain places. He immediately was like, you shouldn't be in here. That was the energy that he brought to me. He said, you shouldn't be in here. It wasn't evil or bad, it was just very stern, like, no, you shouldn't be in here, you need to leave. And so I just explained, hi, I'm Alice and I live here now, and if you don't give me any trouble, I won't give you any trouble. I don't mean any harm, I don't mean to disrupt you and what you're doing. And I expect to be given the same level of respect. And he was sort of, agreeable to this, and I didn't really hear from him again. In fact, he hasn't directly addressed me since then, since that one time. Oh, creepy noises. However, I have encountered him several times since we first met because of the woman. There's a woman who committed suicide in the other apartment, but a long time ago. The timeline that I've been kind of piecing together, I'm just still not sure on, to be honest. It's difficult because I've done so much research on this building and I just can't find any recorded history really about this building other than at one point or another it was used as a post office, like depot. People have lived in it. I don't know why it was originally built. Looking at it from the outside, clearly there's an original part of the building and then bits have been added to it over the years. It's also been built on top of a natural spring. Well, it's not directly on top of the natural spring, but there is a natural spring that runs under it. So there's tunnels underneath where I'm sitting right now. And there's a natural spring that runs underneath, and just across the street there's a well. That's all that we really know about this building. And then when I kind of add in the bits that I've learned from George and from the lady, I've never actually spoken to the lady directly. A lot of her energy is residual from what I can gather. She is very distraught over her death. Basically, the information that I've managed to gather about her is that she was having an affair with a monk or a priest or a clergyman, I'm not sure what he would have been exactly, at the chapel. that's just down the road from this building. In those days, that was punishable by like exile, like death. Like it's an absolute no-no, absolute no-no. Especially as religious men of that time period would take a vow of celibacy. Well, he got her pregnant, completely unplanned, and so now she was pregnant, and that meant that she had to tell her husband, people would know, so she slit her wrists in that apartment. In the room, which is now a bathroom. I don't know if it was a bathroom at the time. I don't know what she was doing in this building. I don't know if she lived here or worked here, or I have no idea. And that she had a son who was in his early 20s when he died. So that's like the stuff that I've experienced since I moved in here, being aware of the very nice man George and of the lady whose name I don't know. And now that this apartment's been redecorated and the wall is being messed with, there's all this other crazy stuff going on. Hearing voices, not being able to sleep, nightmares, having a super creepy feeling in the kitchen. And one night I was sitting with my housemate in his room. I was just sat on the edge of his bed and he was sat on the edge of his bed and we were just chatting, chit-chatting.
Flames.
Just said flames again. Flames. Why are you saying flames? I don't think there's been a fire in this building at any point, but then again, how would I know? Is it because my phone's really hot? Do I need to turn this off? Anyway, so we're sitting on the edge of the bed, we're just like shooting the breeze, just chatting, and he like jerked his leg, and he said, someone just ran their finger up my leg. Like someone just touched me. And there was no one there. It was just the two of us in the room. And he was absolutely adamant that someone had just run their finger up his leg like that. So I was like, let's try something. So I pulled out this app and we set it on the bed and we just continued to talk. And it started talking. For the longest time it was quiet. Now, I've been recording for 36 minutes and this app has only said 4 or 5 words. It was going off It was just talking, and it was saying stuff like Christian, heaven, Jesus, burial. It was saying stuff like at peace, at rest, all things that kind of indicated that this was someone who was very religious and they just wanted to be put to rest, they weren't at rest. I felt that this was a very feminine type energy, and I was like, do you know what? I think it's that lady, because I came to recognize her energy whenever it came around, because I just heard a knock. I've come to recognize her energy now. She will hang out in the corridor out just outside my room here, and she'd hang out in the living room as well. It's normally at night. I don't really feel it during the day, but it's residual. It's definitely residual energy where she just moved through these 2 rooms. And because I've tried interacting with her before and it's I'm not even there. She's no clue that I'm there, and it's residual for sure. And the way energy feels very different when it's residual to when it's active, but the energy was the same, and this time it was active. My housemate, he said he'd never been touched before by a spirit. It was a completely new experience for him, and he was excited but freaked out at the same time, as you would be. If you just got touched by something that you can't see. And then all these words are coming through. It was nuts. And then it just sort of slowed, and then eventually there was no words coming through at all, so I turned it off and that was the end of that. The following day, I was in the house by myself and I was in the kitchen, I was cooking some food, and I felt the energy in the room just turned on its head. It felt sort of okay, and then suddenly it did not feel right at all. And I became very aware of someone standing in the corner of the room where the front door is. I got brave and I was like, who are you and what do you want? You know, if you want anything negative from me, like if you want to cause me any kind of harm, that's not okay. I did my my protection ritual that I do. You know, I set all of that stuff into place and I felt better. Felt protected. And then I pulled this app out again and I set it on the kitchen counter and I started talking. And the words that were coming up were intelligent responses to the questions I was asking. And I very quickly reached the conclusion that this was a young man who was attached to the building because he had done work on that wall that was now being chipped away, and he was upset because he was looking for his mother, and the word mother kept coming up just over and over and over, and his mother is the woman who killed herself in the apartment. And this young man, he'd been like reactivated, he'd been like dormant. It was him and his mother that had been causing all of the paranormal disruption. Oh, tell me you heard that.
Mother.
Are you serious? Me. You just said mother. This is the trouble, right? I've actually been avoiding making this video for some time because I'm well aware that when you talk about this stuff, it kicks up the emotion and then it brings it back. It brings the energy back up. Okay, I'm just going to finish this story as quick as I can because I'm creeped out. I'm here by myself right now and it's creeping me out. So I was getting the word mother like over and over and over, and him and the lady had been the ones that were opening the doors and turning the lights on and off in the apartment across the way. And the reason that this guy, Sam, his name was, he'd been like reactivated because he'd been like, his energy had kind of been dormantly tied to this building. But when they started chipping the plaster off of the wall and going down to the bare brickwork, it had kicked up his energy. It like reactivated his energy, and he'd gone back to what he'd been doing prior to him going into this dormancy, which was looking for his mother. He was trying to find her. He was trying to save her. He was trying to save her. And he told me through various words and short sentences through this app here that he found her body shortly after she'd committed suicide, and it was later found in an autopsy that she was pregnant. And he had been so distraught that not only obviously had she killed herself, but she...
Closet.
It just said closet. But that she had hidden, and what I was going to say, that she'd hidden, he was especially distraught that she'd hidden this big secret, you know, from him, and because from what I could understand, they were quite close, that she was having an affair. That just said closet, kind of like coming out of the closet. She'd been closeted about it. I have like crazy goosebumps right now.
Table.
I am sitting at a table, yet. I just placed my hand on the table as it said table. I am protected. Only positive energy may reside in this space. I am protected. Anyway. So I had this like conversation with this guy Sam. Again, I mean the same as like the other guy at Madeley Court. He was very sad and distraught. Okay, he didn't have any guilt like the other guy did. Oh. The cable just fell off the table. It made me jump. Yeah, he wasn't carrying guilt like the other guy was, but he was just feeling very distraught and sad and kind of lost. And so I was actually sat right here, like I'd finished cooking my food, and I was just kind of talking to him whilst I was eating, and I was just saying, like, you may as well just go home. It's time to move on. You can't hang around here forever. You don't want to feel this way anymore, and the way to not feel this way anymore and to feel better is to go back to source, is to go to heaven, is to go find Jesus and to be at home. And I was using that kind of language. It's not personally what I believe, but he'd told me several times over that he was Christian and that he wanted to go to heaven and wanted to find his mother. The work that had been done, or the disruption in the apartment and with the wall, had kicked his energy up that was dormant, that was trapped here. She had come back to find him, to bring him back to, heaven with her. He was just like stuck. He was lost and stuck. So the energy that has been in this house all this time is her residual imprint, but it wasn't actually her. And then she'd actually come here because his energy is stuck here. So I had this conversation with him, and I was kind of explaining this to him in as much a logical way as I could. And then suddenly that heavy feeling, that creepy feeling, it just lifted. The night prior to that, I had really struggled to sleep because I knew that he was standing in my room, just like standing over me whilst I was in my bed. Not in a menacing, like, kind of way. It was just, he just wanted my help. Like he recognized that I was able to see him and witness him, and I was aware of him, and I could talk to him, and I could sort of hear what he was saying, and I understood what was happening. So he was just kind of hanging around me. Unfortunately, even good spirits who don't mean you any harm, it physically gives you a very creepy feeling just because of the frequency that they're on, and it messes with your auric field, and it just makes you feel very creepy and uncomfortable. It doesn't mean that it's like a demon and it's someone who's coming to get you or wanting to, cause you any kind of harm. It's just the natural effect that it has on us, whilst we have bodies. So I didn't want him around me because it made me feel creepy. And it was difficult to sleep, and it was affecting my dreams, and it was giving me very vivid nightmares, and it was really awful. But then I had that conversation with him that afternoon, and it all just lifted and just went away, and I have not heard anything since. I guess he heard what I was saying, was like, you know what, makes sense. Went to heaven, went to the beyond, went back to source. This is the only time I've used the app whilst talking about that. So very interesting.
Funny.
It said funny. You are here listening to me right now, aren't you? You're being cheeky. I was gonna say, like, it's interesting, that these words are coming through. Whilst I'm talking about it, we had the word mother, and when I was talking about how it said mother, or how Sam was talking about mother, like, over and over and over. The flame thing I don't understand. We had that come through twice. And we had the word howl come through twice, but some of it I don't understand, but some of it was a bit nuts. Like just then. Like that just then. Just funny. Funny. Okay, well, thank you for being here with me whilst I was telling this story. My phone... I was just going to say my phone's on fire. It's so hot. Maybe that's what it meant by flame. I wonder if that's what it meant. Weird. Weird. Pretty spooky. Thank you for being here with me for this second installment of Paranormal Shenanigans. If you enjoyed this content and you would like more, then please let me know in the comments below. I have plenty of stories, things that have happened throughout my life in various different places, but also in that
house. I appreciate you all very much. Thank you again for being here with me today. Remember that you are loved, you are important, you are valuable, and I hope you find something to do today that fulfills you and satisfies your passion. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one.